Up everybody, it's Soren Baker here on Unique Access, and today we're joined by Master Ace. Thank you for coming through, sir.
What up, man? Thank you.
Yes. So Ace obviously has been making music for a long time, and one of the things that I always thought was really interesting was obviously working with Marley Marl at the beginning of your professional career.
Right.
But one of the things I wanted you to talk about was how, as you grew as a producer and became more into the musical side of things from a production standpoint, looking back on the In Control Volume 1 and even earlier than that when you were doing demos and working with him, what did you not understand about production at that point that when you became a producer, you look back and like, oh, Marley showed me that or taught me that and I didn't understand or appreciate it?
I mean, first of all, let me just say I was a sponge watching Marley produce my records. I was asking tons of questions. Why did you do that? Why'd you turn that knob? What did that do? How did you make this sound this bass part? I was really intrigued with how he was doing the low end on his bass. This was around the same time he was doing LL's album, Mama Said Knock You Out, and Booming System. That was one of the records that I would test my car system out with, the LL joint.
Okay.
And so I was always, what's that sound? What's making that deep, that rumble? And so through asking, all of those questions and just being a sponge and watching, I was trying to learn. But what I didn't know how to do was work any of the equipment. I didn't know how to do any of it. Like, my first album came out in '90, but I was bringing records to him in '89. Like, I want to sample this. Like, I want to rap over this part. Mm-hmm. Like, I knew that part of it. I just didn't know how to get it from the record to the machine and then loop it so that I could rap over it. And he knew how to do that stuff. And so I watched him. I paid attention as much as I could. I asked as many questions as I could. And then everything I learned from Marley, I took with me on my second album, Slaughterhouse, and tried to apply it all.
And then what did you learn about writing from him? Like, and not only when he would tell you stuff, but when you'd see him with the other members of the crew.
Right. The only other member I really watched him record with was Craig G. Okay. In terms of that, I think it was just more like him saying, maybe that verse is too long. Mm-hmm. Can you shorten it? So we can have a place for a hook and then start again or whatever. Those are the kinds of things that he helped me with. Nothing in terms of like content or what to write about or, just a little bit of song structure stuff. But I think I had a sense of that already. Okay. So, the demo days were the days where kind of those lessons were taught. And by the time I was working on album songs, I already kind of had my groove and knew what I was doing.
Okay. Yeah. So with In Control, Keep Your Eyes on the Prize is, I thought was a good balance to what you did on the symphony as far as having like the concept and kind of the edutainment type of thing that you would have later. Yeah. So how did you navigate that so early on in your career, having the braggadocio symphony with Keep Your Eyes on the Prize?
Brags was what hip hop was really. Like, as MCs, we came up in a battle atmosphere. So in order to battle other MCs, you had to brag on yourself and talk about how dope you were, how whack he was. So that was just always there. That was part of it. But once I started to get more into like content and, subject matter, such as you mentioned Keep Your Eyes on the Prize, at that point, that was when I felt like being a kid from the hood, Brownsville, Brooklyn, getting the opportunity to go to college, actually get a degree, I felt like other kids in my neighborhood could do the same thing. So I wanted to like put that message somehow in my music. And so I started writing songs that I thought would inspire other kids in my neighborhood to do what I did.
Obviously, from some of our other conversations, you had also mentioned to me over the years about how, you did go to college, and while you were going to college and afterwards, your mom was always trying to figure out like what were you doing, because she didn't understand what rap was or that you could have a career out of it. So she was trying to encourage you to get a job. Right. So how did you kind of navigate those two worlds at the same time?
I just kept telling my mom, like, hold on just a second, like something's about to happen. I wasn't sure what, but I knew that I was suddenly around people like Big Daddy Kane and Biz Markie, and not a lot of other people were around like that. So Marley, he was a big name. he took a liking to me. He seemed to think I had some talent. So I was kind of just like, come on, Ma, let me just feel this out. Let me see where this is going. Because I saw the light at the end of the tunnel, which was an album deal. Mm-hmm. Obviously, if I hadn't been offered an album deal, I would have had to, I'd had to get off the pot and make some other things happen.
I wanted to get more into the emotion of it with the Me and the Biz, the whole story of him not showing up to the studio and you deciding to do that. Like, how do you think things were different if he had showed up, and then do you think you made the right decision doing a song like that?
No, I think it would have been a bigger record if Biz would have did the song with me.
Right.
But you know, he and Marley were kind of at an impasse at that time, and they weren't on the same page about some stuff, and so Biz was down to do the record to help me out, even though he didn't know me that well. He was down to do the record, but he definitely he refused to come to Marley's studio to record. He's like, if you would do it, you come to my studio and do it. And Marley didn't want to do that, so I was in the middle. These guys are bickering with each other, and I'm in the middle just trying to get a record done. And so, you know, I do believe that if Biz had done the record, Me and the Biz, it would have been a bigger record, no doubt about it.
So then, with Take a Look Around, you know, I think you had a lot of innovations on there. With one of the things too, with I Got To, how you had the refrain kind of repeating after every line,
Right.
and you had a lot of social commentary and a lot of samples that people started using a lot more later. But it didn't catch on big time commercially. So for you, like, what was happening with Cold Chillin' at the time, and then how did that, you know, shape your next stages in your career?
Well, you know, Cold Chillin', they were managing some other careers at the same time. They had Big Daddy Kane, who was probably on his way to gold at that point. Biz Markie, same thing, probably on his way to gold. Coogee Rap was selling a lot of units. My record was not selling as many records as them, but what I think made them want to stay the course was that my record started making noise overseas. London in particular. I Got To, you mentioned I Got To, another song, Letter to the Better. Those two songs started to really blow up in the UK. And I went out to London in 91, I think, or 92, and did a couple of big shows out there, like festivals, like I did London Arena, opening up for Public Enemy and EPMD.
Wow.
25,000 people. I'd never even been in front of that many people before. And then my DJ drops Letter to the Better, and 15,000 people jumping at the same time to this record. And that was what made me realize, okay, maybe it's not happening in the States quite the way I was hoping, but it's happening somewhere. And so we're on the right path.
Okay. And then what ended up happening to where you didn't stay with them?
Well, their distributor, which was Warner Brothers, Benny Medina, he decided that the roster was a little bit too crowded. They did a bunch of signings in '91. Kid Capri, The Genius, aka Jizza, Granddaddy IU, Diamond Shell,
Right.
a couple others. They were like, you guys oversigned, you need to trim some of the fat. And so they sent them a list of all of the whole roster, and they drew a line. It was like, everybody below this line, you need to do something else, drop them. Well, we don't want to distribute their records. My name was the name right below the line. I was one name below the line. So they kept Kane, they kept Coogee Rap, they kept Shantae, they kept Shan, they kept Biz Markie. That's all they kept. And everybody else had to go. So I started, immediately my manager's like, look, we could find you another situation. So he started asking questions, asking around, and he talked to these guys over at Delicious Vinyl in LA. They had a nice shop label that had done some really big things with Tone Loc and Young MC, a couple platinum artists, and they were interested in me. They were doing a project with the Brand New Heavies. They were like, we think we like Ace, but let's throw him on this heavy rhyme experience and see how he does with that. And I did a song called Wake Me When I'm Dead. They were like, this song is dope, let's sign Ace. I got signed around the same time as the Far Side.
And with that, obviously in the Sugar Hill Records era, there was live bands playing Curtis Blow and different things with the live stuff. Was that your first time on a record actually having all that live?
I'd never been on a record with a live band until that moment. I'd performed there was a movement out of New York City called Giant Step, and I went on the road with them. They were like basically a hip hop collective of musicians. Nappy G was on percussion. There was a DJ who played like instrumentals, but we had a percussionist, a bass player, a guitar player, and a keyboardist. And then it was me as the MC, and Jamal Ski was the reggae MC. And we went on the road, and we literally each night performing music with nothing written down, just off the head, just figuring it out, trying to create music from nothing, from just everybody kind of just doing their own thing, almost like a jazz vibe. And it opened up my mind to the possibilities of stuff that you could do with bands and with instruments, and the Heavy Rhyme experience happened a couple of years after that.
With Slaughterhouse, a lot of people had, very different reactions for it. I remember at the time, and we've also talked about, but why do you think that album had such a visceral reaction from people?
Because it was a really, really dark album. The production was really, really dusty, not crisp, and at that same time, Dre dropped Chronic. And so his joint was like the most crystal clear, loudest, perfectly EQ'd sounding album ever, and it blew up on both coasts at the same time. Like everybody was playing it in every car. You drive by and you hear those crisp hi-hats, those loud snares. The singing was like way on top. All the vocals were way on top. My stuff was like really, really dark, really muted. It had a vibe, but it wasn't that crystal clear, radio friendly sounding EQ'd stuff. Because we didn't know what we were doing yet. Like this was like fresh from Marley, going into a studio now going, okay, you're on your own, figure it out, make an album. And I'm turning knobs, I'm trying to do what Marley did, but it ain't sounding the same. But we still did a really cool record that was a cult record. The fans who love Slaughterhouse love it, and to this day, they think it's my best work, even though I'll tell you myself it's not. But it was a time period. It was '93. There was a lot going on, and it was a lot to compete against.
Right. Okay. And that obviously you took at times satirical, at times very forceful look at what was going on in rap and a lot of the gangster imagery and stuff. So for you to do that, and it was most associated with the West Coast, or obviously a lot of the East Coast artists were doing similar things at the same time.
Yep.
So what was the juxtaposition of making that, and then when you realized later that with Born to Roll, right after that, people thought you were from the West Coast?
Yeah, it was very, very, very weird. Hard to explain, really. Like, I do this parody called Slaughterhouse. I got guys wearing Raiders hats and Jerry curl wigs and Lokes on the shades, and it looks like I'm really poking fun at the West Coast, which I kind of wasn't, but it was just more, there was, I thought NWA was dope, but I thought there was like so many copycat groups that tried to basically chase the exact same concept that they were doing.
Right.
And at that time, that's all labels was trying to sign was, if you sound like NWA and you dress like them, we're gonna sign you. And it was just annoying to me. I'm just, as a fan, looking at it, this is annoying. Let me poke fun at it a little bit. So I did what I did, and it wasn't to go at a coast or go at a genre. It was just to go at what was happening in the industry, and so that it was taken how it was taken. And then look what happens. A couple of years later. I got really my biggest record of my commercially, my biggest record blows up. And the first place it blows up, West Coast, the Bay, and then LA.
And then what was it, being that it was your biggest song on every level, what was it like to have that first experience of having that kind of getting on the way to stardom and that overwhelming appreciation for your stuff, not in New York?
It was weird because most of the people on the West Coast didn't know anything about me before Born to Roll.
Okay.
And so I remember doing an interview at Z90 in San Diego, and I walk into the radio station, it's a big radio station, and one of those stations where the guys is talking super fast. Yeah, next up we got Masta coming in. Hey, Born to Roll. And then he's like, so tell me, what's it feel like to have your first record out? I'm like, yo, what you talking about? I got 2 albums before this.
Right.
He's like, oh, okay, well, here we go. Here's Born to Roll, Masta Ace, boom. Like, he totally didn't know anything about me, interviewing me, but that was kind of like what the experience was like in the early goings, because people were learning. They were finding out through interviews, through reading, magazines. Like, oh, so he's been out before. Oh, so he was down with Marley and Ken. Oh, that's the same guy from Symphony. Oh, I didn't know that. I thought he was from LA. Like, so there was a learning curve for the fans, and they eventually figured it out, and we're good now.
Okay. And then by the time we get moving into the next phase of your career, post Delicious Vinyl, you became kind of more synonymous with having the conceptual albums, which we see again on Disposable Arts.
Yeah.
So what was it and what is it about you that made you gravitate to having these conceptual projects?
I just think I'm a writer at heart. I really believe that I'm a writer at heart, a creative writer who wants to tell stories, whether it's through rap or some other way. So I tell stories through my music, but then I also tell stories through the interludes of my music. And it's just something in me. It's innate. I need to do it. It's the only way that I feel like I'm having a good time creating music, is when I'm telling a story within a story. And so that's why from Slaughterhouse all the way through, I've been getting better and better at it, and telling a better story, and a more cohesive story, and a story with more clearer. Then I started to add actual, characters that you could follow from one project to the next.
Right.
And so that's where it was all on a road to where I am now, which is I'm writing a musical for the stage. I'm writing a screenplay. I'm writing a TV pilot. I have all of these, writing projects that are on my computer that are now coming to fruition.
And then what do you get differently out of writing a song versus a screenplay or a play or a commercial or something?
It's real different, man. Writing lyrics, a story in rhyme form, that comes supernaturally to me. It's really about just kind of being slick with the wordplay, being slick with the, way you lay out the song, and you surprise ending, however you want to do the verse. But when you're writing a bigger piece of material, the rewrite is crazy. Like, I find myself changing stuff every step of the way, because you're like, this could sound better. So I'm realizing that it's a longer play, and so that takes adjusting, because I'm so used to 16 bars, 24 bars, fix a couple of lines. I don't like how I said that. Let me change that, and then it's done. Whereas writing something that's a longer piece, it might take months to write that, and so I'm learning that, and I'm in the middle of doing that now. I'm in the midst of it, and I'm learning as I go.
So, what's the genesis of this project?
It's called A Brooklyn Story, the name of the album, and it tells the story of Marco Polo, a producer who was born in Toronto, Canada, who moved to Brooklyn back in 2001, and with this dream of becoming a hip hop producer. He wanted to come to New York and chase his dream to be a hip hop producer. He worked for no money at a studio, the cutting room, and was an intern, and eventually he handed me a CD. I would happen to be there working with some other projects. Some little white kid comes up to me, yo, I make beats, and gave me a CD. And I went home, listened to it, and I was like, this kid actually is pretty good. And that moment that he handed me that CD, which was probably 2003 to today, it's come full circle. We did a song called Nostalgia together, which is all over the internet, 8 million views on YouTube. He produced a song on my Long Hot Summer album with a joint with Big Noid called Do It Man. We did a few other little records together, but those few little moments that we worked together had fans around the world clamoring for this project together. We want to hear you guys do more stuff. Nostalgia was so great. Why don't you do a whole project? And so we were just waiting for our schedules to make sense where we could both just commit the time to do it. And we finally found that time.
Okay. And then you had told me about the song with Pharoah Monch.
Yeah.
So explain what the song's about. And
It's called Fight Song. And for those that aren't familiar, I announced through you actually, I don't know how many years ago it was now, 4 maybe years ago, I announced that I was diagnosed with MS. But the diagnosis happened years ago, 2000. But I just held on to that. I didn't want to talk about it. I didn't want anybody to know. And so about 4 years ago, I talked about it and made it public knowledge, and now everybody knows that I have this disease. So I decided to make this song called Fight Song, which is Pharoah Monch is actually rapping as the disease. It's like a battle between him as the disease and me as the person who has it. And we battle on record. He's telling me everything he's gonna do to me to break me down and kill me and this and that. And I'm going back at him on my verse and how I'm still standing. You ain't going whatever. So just a really unique song. And I have to give Paul Barman, for cats that are familiar with my album Disposable Arts, Paul Barman is a character from the skits on that album. He's actually a real person, a real MC, who has a project out right now. And Paul is the one who gave me the idea for that song.
okay.
He just called me up one day and said, Ace, I think you should do a song. I think it'd be cool if you do a song where you're rapping, like battling against MS as another MC. And I think when he approached me with the idea, he thought maybe he would be the other MC. I was like, I don't know yet, Paul. Let me reach out to a few people. And Pharoah was just a guy I knew he was gonna just knock it out the box. And man, he killed it. He killed it.
Mm-hmm. And then how does that fit into the Brooklyn story?
It doesn't fit in at all, actually.
Okay.
It's the last. That's why we put it. It's the last song on the album, so it's not
Okay.
connected to the story in any way. But the rest of the songs all are cohesively connected and help tell the story. But that last song was just the last joint on the album.
Okay. And then what do you think that you do well on this album that you've learned from some of your other conceptual projects that you've applied specifically?
Well, what I wanted to do on this album, because I feel like with these other writing projects coming up that I'm going to be doing less music after this project, after we work this for a couple years on the road. And I'm going to be really putting more time into this musical and to these other ideas, the screenplay and the TV pilot. So what I wanted to do on this album was really get off some more bars, like just kind of like go in on some joints, because I do so many concept songs. Every song is about something. There's a topic, there's a subject, there's a this, there's that. And very few songs on my last few albums where I'm really just rhyming, just going in, just saying bars, just spitting joints. So I said I want to do that on this album a little bit more than I did on previous albums. And so I was able to do that and kind of get that off a little bit. So I got a joint with Xzibit where we just going in, just going in, me and Styles P, just going in, just rhyming. And a few other joints where I'm just rhyming, just going in, just rhyming. Joint with Evidence, just going in, rhyming. And so yeah, that's what it is. That's what I wanted to do on this project that was different than the others.
And then you also, just from the guest list, that's artists from a lot of different places around the country.
Yeah.
So why do you think you in particular have been able to connect with so many people of different styles, different cities, different states, with obviously Born to Roll being the biggest project? How do you think you've been able to sustain this interest when most people would be like, oh, you need to be on the radio? You're very atypical in that regard.
I call that finding your lane.
Okay.
You know, you got to find your lane. You got to find where you fit in this big scheme of things with being music. And when you find that lane, just ride that lane, man. Like do everything you can in that lane. And that's what I've done. A lot of other artists are in the same lane as me, but they're not willing to do the things that I do. They're not willing to tour 200 days out of the year. They're not willing to come off stage and sign autographs for 300 people. They're not willing to stand at the merch table and help sell your own merchandise. And I've just kind of figured out where I fit in this thing, and I've just done a good job of maximizing it.
Okay. And then as you're progressing, how do you feel whenever you do approach music again? Are you going to be interspersing that into your other writing projects, like the screenplay or obviously the musical, but how are you going to integrate them?
I think with the screenplay, I think this is more of just kind of me telling my story, but in movie form.
Okay.
But the musical is really telling the story of the characters that are on my albums from really, I would say it's loosely based on the stories on Disposable Arts, A Long Hot Summer, The Falling Season, and M.A. Doom, Son of Yvonne.
Okay.
Within those 4 projects, if you're familiar with all 4 of those, then you'll be familiar with some certain moments in the musical will sound familiar to you. You'll remember those moments from those albums.
Be sure to check out the history of gangster rap by Soren Baker. He's official.
History of Gangster Rap features exclusive interviews with Ice-T, Snoop Dogg, MC Ren, the D.O.C, and dozens of others. The History of Gangster Rap, a definitive look at how Los Angeles changed rap forever.
In Los Angeles, the streets definitely set the tone of the hip-hop music.
A 19, I got a $50,000 car.
My whole angle always was, I'll be street, but I will always tell you the horrors that go along with this life.
It would be penalties and casualties for just wearing the wrong color in somebody's neighborhood.
And once gangster rap made it from the streets to the TV, the genre exploded.
With Fab 5 on your TV back with NWA.
Yo MTV, it just catapulted us from being local heroes to national gangbang rappers.
The History of Gangster Rap discusses it all from 1980 up till today.
It's always gonna be shit happening in the streets. You know what I mean? So it's always gonna be something to talk about.
The History of Gangster Rap in stores now.